Grid Investor Network. This is Danielle Palleschi-Browne. I am an agent and investor, flipper, and sales trainer here in the DMV. And today I am here with Chase Clement from New Western. And I'm really excited for you guys to meet and chat with Chase. He is new to the DMV area, but definitely not new to real estate. So Chase, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about New Western?
I will do. Thank you so much for the intro. It's such a pleasure to be here, especially with you. You are such an expert and a respected person in this world, especially down here. So such an honor to be here. So I've been in real estate for 6 years, and it's almost all been focused in the investment real estate side of real estate. I started working for New Western, which is a nationwide investor marketplace in Philadelphia in 2017. My broker at the time and I now have been asked to come to the DMV and open our office. So we are a month into operating in the DMV. And what New Western does is we source investment properties and bring them to qualified investors. Our process might be some people might say, okay, they wholesale transactions, but there are a lot of things that differentiate us from your average wholesaler. And it's not only that we can afford to close on these deals, and in most cases do, but we only work with qualified investors on the buyer side, and we fully analyze all potential exit strategies and source deals on the buying side. So we like to just be people's easy button on both sides of the transaction if we can, and we're very happy to be in the DMV and here with you right now. So thanks, Danielle.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm always probably one of the biggest challenges most people are having right now is I think it's like a two-pronged approach, right? Is one, finding deals, which your team specializes in, and then two, analyzing them for what's going on in the market and how we're seeing changes, and also some of the fears that have been kind of provoked recently because anything that's not so seller skewed, I think, feels like a recession or a collapse or like whatever chaos term you want to throw at it. But the truth is it's really more of a small correction, and this is like a very normal process for the market. So today what I'm really excited that we're going to be chatting about is how to do comps, like your style, my style, other styles we've heard of. Like it's really comping properties and deals, right? Because it's step one if you're interested in a deal is comping that property, right? Yes. It's an art and it's a science because it has to be so data driven, but there has to be some understanding and knowledge of that market, of who your end buyer is or tenant, or like, what are you going to do with it? So there's a little bit of art and a little bit of science. So what do you think about it? Like, or how do you approach comping?
Very well put, by the way. I like the art and the science. I couldn't agree more with that. We approach comping by first off looking at an as-is value. So going through a deal, you want to make sure that the purchase price is fair and competitive. So we're going to look at as-is comps first, and then we'll explore various exit strategies using the data that is provided, not by going to try and create a comp or turn something into a deal, but just using the data that's provided to determine potential exit strategies and which the most profitable exit strategies are, and move towards those. So we really just try and let the data tell us what the best strategy or potential strategies for how to do a deal are. Yeah, and that's never going to change really for us.
No, and it's honestly one of the biggest, I hate to say rookie mistake, because really this can happen at any point in your career doing this. Like when you're really in the mood to buy something, or if you're really in the mood to get a deal going, or you really need to, for whatever reason, if you're feeling in the mood to make a move on a potential deal, be careful to not create comps or create a market scenario that's just not there, because it is one of the biggest ways to get burned, and burned hard. We're not talking about buying a shirt that doesn't fit. We're buying a house. We're buying property. Like it could be really any property. But it's such a good point you bring up. Like, don't force it. If you have to force it even a little bit, it's not a deal, or it's not going to make sense for you potentially with whatever criteria that you have. Okay, so
also double check people's comps. If someone's sending you a deal and they're sending you comps, look into them, double check them, pull some of your own if you want, because if that person is bringing you an actual viable deal, you should be able to discuss them openly together. There should be everything on the table at all times.
And I mean, all of this information is available. So whether you have a real estate license and access to MLS, I mean, that would be ideal. Right. Or if you don't, you could still use other resources, dare I say it, Zillow, or leverage working with a real estate agent or team that specializes in working with investors, kind of like me and my partner Aster, or find other resources to get your sold comps. All of this is public record. So whatever tool you need to use, I would highly recommend that. But let's talk about like our different styles. Do you want to start with yours? I know you have something to share.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So what I have to share is, and let me pull this up for a second. Are you able to initiate the screen share? Or should I just share my screen? Oh, yes, you are. Okay, great. So this is my screen.
We're in a matrix.
Yeah, we are. We are in the matrix. Okay, so what I have is just a project analysis packet of ours. And this is an example of actually a deal that we have available right now. So we identified this deal as a potential viable flip or hold or burr. And that's just because of how clean the property is and its purchase price in relation to other projects that have recently been done in the area. So what is in this packet is our flip comps. But what I would like to do, if you don't mind, is just pull some as is comps right now with you guys, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I am going to go to the MLS.
The ever popular.
Yes, the ever popular. And so our address is 616 Tewksbury Place Northwest. It is a deal that's available right now. We have a showing Friday at 11, but we want to look at as much data as possible so we can see what data supports our current value or tells us that the price that we're looking at probably isn't a fair price for a specific deal. So it's always just going in to see what the data tells us, not trying to find something in the data. Can't be more of a broken record about stuff like that.
If you have to push it, it doesn't work.
That's right. Agreed. We are not here to force things. So we are 616 Tewksbury Place Northwest. That's us. So I'll also stop and take a second here to let you guys know about one of the most important things in comping, no matter what kind of comp it is your criteria and how strict or how loose your criteria is. The reason that this is a way for people to sometimes get taken advantage of is because it's a comp that sold 2 years ago, or I mean, in this case with interest rates, how they are, a comp that sold a year ago.
Or even 6 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. And more bedrooms, bigger square footage, different style of home. There are just so many things that factor into comping criteria that need to be checked. So we're going to get into that right now. So we are a quarter mile. We are going to change this from 400 to 200, just so I still have some matches, because there aren't going to be so many if I do like 180 or anything like that. Active, pending, and closed within a quarter mile of our property. We are a 1,700 square foot, 4-bed, 2-bath. So what I'm looking for is similar sized properties that have sold for near what we're available for. So we are available for $539. Quinta Place Northwest, 3-bed, 2-bath, 890 square feet. So a touch bigger than us, 1 bed less than us. But let's just see what it looks like. Let's take a look.
But the square footage is roughly the same.
Exactly. Square footage is, and our rule of thumb there is within 20% of our square footage, and we never break that code. We find out what 20% of our square footage is. We never go higher than that.
Yeah,
in this case,
I would agree, mostly because you change functionality of a home within 10 to 20% difference of size. And when we're talking about under 2,000 square feet, that's a significant, like 100 or 200 square feet this is how I kind of visualize it in my head, is 70 square feet is the size of a decent sized bathroom. 100 square feet is the size of a dining room, or potentially like an okay sized bedroom, a 10 by 10 bedroom, or a den or an office. And 200 square feet is like a okay sized living room space too.
Sure.
So like when you have these kind of concepts in your head, when you're like, oh, well, it's 200 square feet difference. Is that a big deal? Maybe.
Right.
Depending on where that square footage lives in that house, it might be.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. That's a really great way to break it down to how that square footage is distributed throughout the house is a really great way to look at it. So just with these as-is comps, same product as us as far as, I mean, above grade square footage is only 1251, but similar size home, same style. It happens to be a 3-bed and it has no interior photos. So most likely not in the best shape. Let's go.
Not likely.
Not
Does
like,
it have any historical photos by chance? Sorry, I didn't check.
No, please, by all means. Let me go.
Sometimes, as a tip for anybody who's maybe not a realtor and doesn't like dive deep into MLS all the time, there's a little, it looks like a little like a page or a piece of paper, and it has an H on it, and it says that is the historical listings for that listing, if it exists, and if it's been listed anytime since I think 1985 or 1987, something like that, mid-80s. If there's a previous listing, you often can try to see if there's previous listing photos. I'd say probably 30% to half the time there are at some point in here, and that could be really, really valuable to you.
That's a great point. And in this case, there weren't, but something to always check on when there aren't many photos available currently.
Yes, or none.
Right, for sure. So just, I don't want to get too bogged. I don't want to dive too deep into this because I'm kind of nerding out and I enjoy this stuff. But why this next property is not a comp as is, because it's 2,000 square feet. We're only 1,700. It's just over our within 20% mark for square footage. So go up to 600. So I just want you guys to see the photos of this property. Our property is currently available for $539. This property closed at $600,000 with this quality of finish. And now I'd like to show you.
Sold for roughly 60 grand more.
Exactly. And this is the quality of our property right now. It has 1 or 2 drywall spots, but the kitchen's been updated. It has central air. It has off-street parking. It has an extra bedroom. It has more square footage. And it's something to help confirm the potential as-is value of your property. And in this case, the as-is comps do help our as-is value, help our price, if you will. So
for sure.
That's just one example of how I look at as-is comps. And I'd love to hear if you have anything to add to it or what you do differently or similarly.
Yeah. I mean, some of the criteria that I like to focus on the most is, like you were saying, condition is something that cannot be done via a Zestimate. Like finishes, features, like certain features, like if something has I don't know, like a built-in wine fridge or a pot filler or little details like that kind of indicate quality of a home.
Sure.
It is not going to necessarily be searchable or quantifiable in something like a Zestimate or some kind of online tool, right? That's where they get to be the most inaccurate. Parking, like you mentioned, especially when you're looking in a metropolitan area like DC, in DC proper, parking, I'd like to say it's invaluable, but we actually can value it. So depending on the part of the city, I've seen it as cheap as $25,000, but I've seen it as expensive as like $75,000 to $100,000.
$500. Okay. Wow. Sure.
Like in a property like this, my personal opinion, for the neighborhood in Brightwood, which in this area, parking is not that easy. I'd say you're probably looking between $30,000 and $50,000 for a parking spot, probably with about 35 to 40 being the average that people pay right now, especially for private. And if you put up a garage door, I'd say you're probably closer to that 40 to 50-ish range, because then it becomes secured, private, off street. And then if you got a roof over it, then you're really at like the 50,000. So if you turn it into a garage or a carport situation.
Agreed.
So parking like totally changes the value of a property.
Definitely.
Completely changes it.
Yes, it does.
And it changes the end buyer for you because more and more buyers, even in DC, are looking for parking options, or at least to have the option of parking. Same thing with yard space, right? Like, who here doesn't know somebody with a dog?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we have. I wish I could show you what's.
Yeah. Oh, Gucci. It's something that's so highly desirable, and even just people like being outdoors. Ever since the pandemic, everybody wants outdoor space. So whatever kind of creative outdoor space that is, be it a yard, a front patio, a balcony, a roof deck, like whatever, all of those can really impact value, quantifiable value. So you want to find comps that have those kind of features similarly. And like another really big differentiator, when you get to at least 3 bedrooms in a property, at least this is how I feel, but Chase, I'd love to know your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Once you get to 3 bedrooms, the difference between 3 and 4 bedrooms to me is just whether or not you have maybe that square footage, or if you're actually utilizing the square footage in the best way.
Agreed.
To me, like you can comp 3 and 4 bedrooms together in a bundle if they all have the same amount of square footage personally. But how do you look at it?
I agree with you there as far as 3 and 4 beds in relation to the square footage. If you know what, I'm just gonna pull up our packet because it's a perfect example of how we comp this actually, and it's a perfect transition into this.
Yeah.
So with our comps, we typically pull same or fewer beds than we have. So in this case, we are a 4-bed, 2-bath. You'll see here that our highest value property at oh no, not our highest. You'll see here that two of our 5 comps are 3 beds, and they're 752 and 760. And also all of our 4 beds have their 4th bedroom in the basement, just like our property. So the values are not indistinguishable, but very close together. And it's not the bottom 2 that are the 3 beds and the top 3 that are the 4 beds. And also we saw 3 beds with higher values than 803, but like you mentioned, square footage is important there. So with bigger square footage, 3 beds, they might bring a higher value, but I couldn't agree more that 3 and 4 beds can be interchangeable depending on their footprint and whether or not their extra space, like basement, does suit an extra bedroom, like whether or not it has egress and the height, as you know, 2 important factors there.
Well, and where those bedrooms fall in the floor plan can actually also make a difference for who your end buyer is, right? Like
Agreed.
As agents, we have to be mindful of things like fair housing, but as an investor and as a developer or someone investing in someone else's project, you're often going to want to look at and consider, where are these bedrooms in location to each other? Like, are they all on a second floor? Like you'll hear a lot, like 3 bedrooms up, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of families or people with young children that like that layout because their kids' bedrooms are near them. So at nighttime, it makes for ease. But if you have a different buyer who that doesn't really matter to them, and they're like, oh, there's 2 bedrooms upstairs and I really need 1 bedroom downstairs because someone I'm going to be living with has mobility issues. So I need like a 1st floor master or at least a bedroom.
Sure.
That is a totally different buyer pool, right? Totally valid layouts, but who you're actually selling to at the end, say you have a 1st floor master or a primary bedroom, even suite or not, like whichever, you may want to consider things with, how do people get into the house? Do I need to have like a patio that maybe has a wheelchair ramp? Or do I need to have as few steps into the house? Or do I need to have every other living space on the same level as that primary bedroom?
Right.
Because this is what that end buyer is going to be thinking about.
I love that
when they're going to buy.
I love that you're doing this, because one thing we are always doing is trying to look at things through the perspective of our end buyer. Not only the end buyer being the person who's eventually going to live in the rehabbed property, but the person who's going to do the project for the eventual end buyer. And typically in 3 and 4 beds, it's going to be a family, whether it be a first-time home buying family or a family that works in the city, whatever it may be. They're most likely going to want 3 or 4 bedrooms for their kids, and typically an open floor plan. So when someone's in the kitchen, they can see all the way to the front door. They can see out the back. Just always a good idea to be thinking from the perspective of, at least in our case, the person we're going to sell to who's doing the project and the person they're going to be selling to who's going to live in the home eventually.
Yep. And as salespeople, right, who are having the conversations with first the developer buyer or investor buyer, and then you're pitching to them like, hey, if this is your style, this is what we think the best ROI for this property is based on numbers. Here's the data, blah, blah, blah. If that's a kind of project you'd be interested in, then let's talk. But if you don't want to do a condo conversion, if you don't want to add a roof deck, if that's not your vibe, cool, then this isn't the project for you. So you're really doing it's like a 2-series pitch. It's like, here's the project, but here's what I think, we've already done the research for you. This is what we think you should do with it. But if you don't want to do that kind of project, just don't.
Right. And full disclosure to that point, we're good at what we do. And sometimes we will be surprised by someone's choice of strategy. We're going to propose all potential profitable exit strategies on a deal. And still at the same time, someone might come out of left field and say, you know what, I know you guys have a flip and a condo conversion, but I think this is a buy and hold as is. And we're like, hey, we're not going to tell you not to do it. I see what you're seeing. And here's some other options as well. But that's why it's important for us to be working with buyers who are looking for all sorts of different properties, because that's what we really get. So important that we have a diverse buyers list as far as what people are looking for.
Well, and what my opinion of the best ROI, whether it's data driven or not, doesn't mean that investor, that's the best strategy for them.
Exactly. Sure.
Or even if I think I'm like, hey, this is exactly what you want to do. If their strategy right now is I need to acquire and just hold as much as possible, and I want to wait for interest rates to go down and then I'll develop. Okay. Who am I to tell you not to do that? Like, if that's your strategy, thanks for letting me know. It's also good to get feedback from investors in that way, because the more opinions and the more thoughts you hear on things, the more it makes you actually knowledgeable of the true market, right? Because we are the market.
Yes.
Everyone we converse with, all our clients, all of our network, we are the market. So I always find it interesting when someone's just like, no, I would never do that. I'm like, hey, this isn't a personal affront, but can you tell me why? I'd really genuinely love to know your thoughts. Yeah. And I have been pleasantly surprised sometimes by people's opinions and thoughts and where they're coming from. It's always not just emotionally driven. Right. With investors, I find it's often data somehow.
Sure.
Ties back to data.
And sometimes there's some educating that needs to happen. There might be a misinterpretation of certain data, but often there isn't. And they do have a valid point as far as what they're capable of or what they're looking for. And that's fine. I tell every investor I work with, I need you to be able to be comfortable telling me no, because I will not take it personally. I just think it's an opportunity for us to grow and save each other time. The next time I bring you something, it's going to refine how I look at deals through your eyes. So I couldn't agree more with how important that is. And just letting the investor is the market, just like you said. Yep. Always getting feedback. Very important.
Well, and don't be afraid of the feedback, right? The feedback is what keeps you in business and keeps you from being broke. Exactly. But even as an agent, right? So as an agent and somebody working directly with sellers, and you also work directly with sellers in a different capacity, or working with buyers directly, it's very important to understand what their needs are. And those are going to change pretty constantly. Yes. And asking those questions, just because they told you once something 6 months ago, doesn't mean that is still the case. So it's a really good way to check in with them and say, hey, I think this meets the criteria based on our last conversation. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Like, interest rates in February were 3%. They're not. They're not, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Okay. So agreed. As the market changes, chat with your clients and also your comping. Right now, I'm comping things much more conservatively than I was in February or even January or end of last year, where things seemed a little almost too good to be true for a while, maybe. And that's maybe my personal opinion or thoughts. But what do you think? How are you feeling about the current market, how things are shifting or not shifting? You may not think it's shifting. And what are you kind of doing to combat some of it?
I appreciate you asking that. I do believe that there is a shift happening. I also don't think it's this catastrophic crash of any kind. I think it's more of a return to some level of normalcy. I think we've all been, I mean, at least in the real estate market, a bit spoiled in the last 2 years, maybe a little.
If you're on the listing side.
Yeah, sure.
You buyer, it's been rough.
I hear that. But we are really here. I mean, I know us anyway, and you as an agent and an investor, you're here to reflect the market. You're not here to create something that isn't a deal. And if the market is doing what the market is doing, it's our job to adjust, not to hope that the market adjusts to what we continue doing. So we're going to comp more conservatively. We're probably going to get more pushback if we don't comp conservatively. So you and I had a conversation earlier today about the date of comps and how far back we're willing to go. Even,
very recent conversation.
Yeah, as recent,
like 2 hours ago.
Exactly. Going back past March, April, it's somewhat not as relevant as it would have been in a deal that I put out in January, going back a year. Yeah. So just being aware of what's going on in the market, trying to continue reflecting buyers' concerns and be concerned for them by how we comp, so that when they see a deal from us, they know, okay, they knew that these were going to be my concerns. They've addressed them. It's really the best way for us to help still find people deals and keep buying.
Yeah. And I would say probably one of my best tips for now in terms of comping, like keep doing, feature for feature, location for location, like all the standards. But I would definitely make sure people are really looking at days on market for the last 30 to 60 days. Don't go further than that, and look at an entire neighborhood of similar units, not even just similar units, look at an entire community. So like, say you're looking at a condo, for instance, look at the whole building. Don't worry about price point. Don't worry about, start at the widest net and then tone it back, but don't go back further than like 2 months, because it's just, the market is not the same. It's just not. And you may give yourself a lot of false or skewed information if you're comparing February, January, December of last year's sales to right now in July with like 5-ish% interest rates and inventory that we are, for the first time in a very long time, seeing people who are overpricing more frequently. And days on market that may be a little bit more than just like 1 to 5 or less days on the market, and 5 being mostly because agents went active on a Wednesday or Thursday and accepted offers until Sunday or Monday and ratified. Like, took the weekend to collect as many offers as possible, and that's why it took 5 days. Right. So I would say be mindful of your days on market and be open to thinking like, hey, this has to be really inclusive of my comps and what I'm thinking about. And your buyer at the end is going to be concerned about them too. Definitely. But so anything else that you can think of, Chase, that we forgot or should mention in the importance right now, like with comps or the shifting market?
Definitely. I think it's important just in general if someone can afford it, I'm completely understanding and empathetic to the fact that certain people are beholden to certain strategies just because of their financial availability or their liquidity. At the same time, if you can afford to let the deal tell you what the best strategy is, look at something as a buy and hold or a BRRRR if you can, because you might be surprised. And that's why we run as many, and we cast a wide net when we comp, we cast a wide net when we start looking at exit strategies. We want to check boxes off and find out, okay, this does or doesn't make sense all the way through. So I think it's just a good idea for people to familiarize themselves with as many exit strategies as they can, because then they become available to you. And, you have people like Danielle and myself available. We couldn't make it easier for people to understand those things. And you're literally an instructor about how to invest. So, I
I enjoy teaching people how to do it, right?
Same.
I couldn't agree more. I think as we move into this shift, just be open to getting a little weird. Like, be open to creative solutions to problems that felt weird or insurmountable. Like, do research on things like government grants, opportunity zones. Like, if you're looking in DC in particular, those are fantastic options.
Yep.
Be more open to buyers that have more creative financing, like maybe somebody, especially on buy and hold properties, that can use FHA loans or VA loans.
Sure.
Like, I think we're going to see a lot more creative problem solving to getting deals done. And I'm very interested in hearing other people's solutions as we get into this shift in this market and how people are solving problems. So I'm kind of excited to see. Like, I don't see a shift in a market as a bad thing, because you adjust, and
Absolutely.
Not everyone likes adjusting. I feel really comfortable with change. That's not everybody. So maybe I sound a little weird for being like, I can't wait for a market shift. But like, to me, it's the market is the market. That's it. Deals close every day.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, this was really exciting, and I'm excited to also chat next week. So for those of you that tune in most weeks, my partner, Raj Tamang, he is he's out of the country visiting family for an entire month, which is wonderful, and I'm so excited for him. So for the next couple of weeks, Chase has been joining me, and we wanted to create some other investor-friendly content, and especially talk about the shift in the market, because it's been a shift, and everybody should be prepared. So Chase and I were discussing, and we've talked a bit today about how to determine the best ROI for a property.
Yes.
I think we could dive into those tactics and strategies a little bit more. So maybe next week we can meet, or the week after. In the not distant future, we'll meet again, and we can talk about some of these strategies and how to determine the best ROI. So, like, should it stay a single family? Should it be a condo conversion? Should this be a Walmart? Like, we could talk to you about what we've both done to determine those ROIs. And if anybody has any feedback or questions, please leave it in the comments, and then we'll tackle them soon. But thank you so much for joining me, Chase.
Danielle.
And please do leave New Western's website in the comments as well, so people can click and learn a little bit more about you guys.
I will do. I'll also leave my contact info in there if anyone wants to reach out. And I couldn't agree that us talking about identifying ROI strategies is a perfect transition from comping, because we will be using a lot of the things we spoke about today in identifying those exit strategies and best forms of ROI. So looking forward to it. Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to doing it again with you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a good one, guys. Bye, Grid.
Bye, all.